Well, you know what? We can at least start the introductions. It's 8:34, so we're already running 4 minutes late, which means we're going to run 4 minutes late on the other end, too.
Oh.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Swadge Chainsaw Dev Stories. Chainsaw Swadge Dev Stories. 2 years are better than one, which makes you think that we've had 2 years to prepare. And we have done that for the Swadge, but not for this presentation. This is very much the first time we're talking through it, so enjoy the stutters and verbal fillers. And while this is a presentation, I also like it to be a conversation. So if you have any questions at any point, yell them out. We'll try to repeat the questions so everyone can hear, and then we'll move right along. Just some quick introductions. My name's Adam. I've run the Swadge team for, I guess, 3 years at this point. I guess it's kind of my thing at this point. Working down the table.
I am Julian, also.
You may want to get right into the mic.
And also known as Thaley. And I do a lot of the physical badge design, kind of the UI UX piece of it. I made the manual this year. There's an awesome PDF manual, by the way, on swadge.com on the URL. That link's on the URL that's on the back of your Swadge. Check it out, and we will be doing a physical print one of those for after event. We're going to be doing some pre-orders after event for printing out actual physical copies. It is the size and format of a Game Boy Advance manual, so that's going to be a really cool extra. The snow prevented us from being able to get them for event, so we just said, you know what, it's going to be a pre-order rather than a super rush job. It's just going to be a pre-order. So wanted to mention, that's cool. I also did a fair amount of durability testing, UI testing. I don't think I have any actual modes in this year.
Not this year.
Doggo.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, the story with him was before he started strapping the Swadges to his dog and letting it run free, the Swadges had a much higher failure rate. And so...
Oh, by the way, 1 ounce.
Oh, sorry.
Shield. Not a problem. Not a problem.
Anyway, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
See? It's awkward. I warned you. You want to introduce yourself, Charles?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm Charles. And so I did the flight sim this year, and I've been involved with Swadge stuff, I don't know, I guess since the first Swadge.
Charles also wrote Color Chord, and wrote, because isn't Color Chord still like the basis of the Nano SSDK that will... Isn't that pretty...
Oh, yeah. I wrote the tool set that we use underneath, and I wrote the core of Color Chord. So, but the Color Chord app that you guys wrote, that wasn't me. Who did Color Chord?
That was me.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
you wrote the current version.
It's a team effort.
A lot of that, the weird math magic that Color Chord does to walk, that's Charles.
Yeah, we're going to get to all that later in the presentation. So,
My name is Jonathan Moriarty, and I'm a developer on the M-type mode this year, and then 2 years ago, which is when I came on, I did the mode Tiltrads for the barrel Swadge. Thank you.
All right. So now you know who we are, but no one cares. You all care about the Swadge. So let's get started. First of all, before we even have any sort of PCB or modes or anything, we did something new this year, which was to use 3D printing, which is very exciting because we can take our rough designs and print them out and see how they feel in our hands, which is not something that we've done before, which means we can make a whole bunch of different prototypes, and we can do it pretty quickly. I want to shout out to Socks, who I don't think is here. He's down in Indie Arcade, so if you want to go down to Indie Arcade and yell out Socks, he'll appear from the shadows. But I gave him a bunch of designs, because I don't have a printer, and he printed them out. And he checked how they felt in his hand. He checked different button layouts. He checked different diffuser sizes. And we went through that iterative process real quickly, which was super nice. Oh, yeah, that diffuser thing that I mentioned. Some things you can't actually prototype with 3D printing, and you have to do it the old-fashioned way by ordering a bunch of stuff. So if you have a chainsaw, actually, I can show that. You'll notice that this top part is actually another small PCB on top of the LEDs. And we put it there for two reasons. One, so the LEDs don't blind you. And two, to cover up some glass edges on the screen so you don't cut yourself or shatter that.
that was the biggest contribution of my dog as a durability tester.
Yeah.
That we had to put something over that, and it turns out the cheapest way to shield one is actually to just have another PCB soldered on top. That's actually less expensive to manufacture than making a case.
Yeah, PCB is real cheap, especially if you're not putting anything on it.
I then said, wait a minute, it's also a diffuser if you don't put anything through. So.
Right, because you can shine light through fiberglass. So we ordered a whole bunch of different thicknesses, I think from like 0.2 millimeters to like 2 millimeters, thereabouts. This was like a very early shape that we put together just because. And we just shined a whole bunch of light through them. I just kind of sat there trying A, then B, then C, then D. And we picked one that was both sturdy enough to be protective, but also thin enough that light would shine through pretty nicely. Also, fun fact, at the absolute thinnest one, it's actually really flexible, which is way cheaper than if you try to make a flex PCB. If you try to order a flex PCB, they'll charge you an arm and a leg. If you order a really thin PCB, they don't care. So there's your life hack for the day. Other things we prototyped was that, once we had the diffuser thickness, we had art, which we played around with, and we looked at a couple of different colors. We ended up putting metal over the LEDs to kind of indicate where they are. I worked way too long on that. Lost a lot of sleep for no good reason because they're all kind of fine anyway. But prototypes like these are going to be part of the auction, the charity auction on Sunday. We have a whole bunch of different prototypes. I think some of the 3D printed stuff is also going to be on the auction block. So quick pitch, if you want to own a piece of Swadge history, show up to the auction and donate some money. But that was all, hardware and mechanical and 3D printing and fun stuff you can touch. We also had new firmware tools this year, which definitely eased development and allowed us to do more exciting things. The two that I'd like to highlight is we have an emulator. I guess it's technically a simulator, where we can take the code that we write for the Swadge and run it on our computers. And in theory, you could too, because it's all open source. And if you have the compiler, which is also open source, you can just do it. It's all on GitHub. The links for that you can find through the URL on the back of the Swadge. But it turns out having a simulator makes development really fast, because you don't have to deploy code to your Swadge and fiddle around with it every time. You also get fun things like breakpoints and watch points, things that a normal software developer would be comfortable with. Downside is that it's not actually a Swadge. There are some differences. So for at least the first-person shooter mode that I did, I ran it first in the emulator, and it was great. And I ran it on the Swadge, and it was real slow, because it turns out that your 12-core PC is slightly more muscly than these little embedded processors. So there's still some differences. It's not a full replacement for Swadge development, but it lets you iterate fast, and then you can optimize stuff later. The other thing we had this year is a continuous integration, which, again, if you're a software developer, I see some fists in the audience. There we go. Oh, actually, a lot more. All right, you guys are a bunch of nerds. For everyone who's not a software developer, this means that there's some magic server in the cloud somewhere that every time we make a change, it just builds the firmware, and in our Slack, it drops a firmware binary to put on the Swadge, and it also drops a new version of the emulator, which meant that anyone on our Slack could test things as we were developing, which was super useful for catching bugs and, well, mostly catching bugs.
Yeah, well, if I can jump in for a second.
Yes, please do.
Something that an added benefit for that is that in previous years, when I had collaborated with other people on music and assets, I'd had to basically take videos and send those over as zips, and the end result was actually the menu mode or the music for Tiltrads. I didn't know this at the time, but there was actually an error in the way that the sound file was being converted that was actually causing it to play at half speed. And we didn't catch it until after release. But one of the advantages to having this sort of continuous integration pumping out these builds that are emulation so I can send them out to anybody is that it's a lot easier to work with other folks who aren't working with a physical Swadge.
Yep. And we do have, I believe this video is on YouTube, right, Charles?
Yes, I don't recall if it's public, though.
Yeah, we can circle back to watching the actual video if we have time at the end. Otherwise, if you just search for Swadge Emu, or that's probably the best way to find it, or you email circuitboards@magfest.org, which is us, I can send you that link. But it's it's a software program. It's cool. Oh, or if I just press the button, it'll play.
Well, it looks like this thing went ahead of schedule a little bit more. So I have the Swadge
No,
emulator. We can look at Swadge Emu, which is 55 kilobytes. We can run Swadge buttons.
Anyway,
So
yeah,
like this switches.
very, very early software.
We had other modes. It could do other things. And this controls the volume. So
Anyway, cruising along. Factory programming. We can talk about that for a quick second. Takes a lot of manual labor to program these things, and that's time that I don't particularly want to spend. But it turns out you can have the factory do it for you, which is great. So
It's still better than the time you spend laser cutting and gluing 3,000 pieces of acrylic hexagon. So, yeah.
Yep. But we ended up doing some recycling this year, save the environment. The same connector that's on the barrel Swadge is also on the Chainsaw Swadge. It looks like a PCIe X1 connector, but don't plug it into your motherboard because it's not. Looks can be deceiving. Not liable for things exploded. But this meant that we could take the same programmers that we used for the barrel Swadge, didn't have to redesign those, and give them to our factory, and they would just do all the programming for us and ship them here, which was great. The other thing we did differently, the barrel Swadge had separate test firmware and real firmware, so they would test it at the factory with test firmware, then we had to reflash it. Now the test mode's actually integrated. So it runs once, it passes, and you never see it again. Well, actually, there is a secret way to see it again, but you'll have to email me and ask about it. Anyway, but the fact that we could reuse last year's programmer was great. DAC, who I report to, said, hey, let's make a new one anyway. So we made a new one anyway. And that is available. Well, I guess it would have been available if you kicked into one of the merch tiers. I think it was Rip and Wear. But they're out there. And we do not need to watch this video.
That test mode really worked out great because one of the things about doing contract manufacturing is they will pass whatever tests you give them. They will make it past that. So if you have something, if you have a test mode that fully exercises the hardware, they can run it through. They can check it. That means we can be confident that we're going to get pretty much 100% out of the box are going to work correctly. So yeah, we had a simple little mode that completely exercises the hardware, uses all the peripherals, and makes it so they can just very quickly, automatically upon flashing, it's just very quick to glance at it and see, yep, everything's good. So that's how we got to very important part of quality control. If you're having third-party manufacturers, make it test itself. That's the easiest way to.
And I think that about concludes the portion on design and development. Now let's actually talk about what this thing can do. So I believe the first one up is M-Type.
Yes. So
I'll play along on the overhead camera, and you can talk as you see fit.
sounds good. Well, so my inspiration for this mode this year was actually the previous MAGFest. You'll recall had sort of a Star Fox type inspired theme, and had that one shirt that I really liked of like the fighter with sort of the square wave trail. So I wanted to kind of do something in sort of a side scrolling space shooter style. I did also want to shout out the art for this mode was done by Yo, who's in the audience. I want to thank them because they make what I do look a lot better than it has any right to. And so the goal was sort of a simple R-Type-esque shooter with a sort of a unique added mechanic, which is the reflect shield. And the reflect shield charges when you're not firing. And my idea for that was whenever you're doing an action game, and this is something that it's a design tip that I really try to take to heart, is when you're designing something where you can shoot, for shooting to matter, there has to be a reason not to shoot. That's from a quote from Jan Willem Nijman from The Art of Screen Shake. So when you're not shooting, you're charging the reflect shield, and then you can release that to reflect projectiles back at the enemy and also ram through them. There's also power-up levels that will kind of increase the amount of lasers that you're firing. At level 4, it also increases your speed. A fun fact, the ground generation code is actually stolen from a Flappy Bird mode that never made it into the game. I believe that was actually Adam wrote the code for that. I was like, that's going to do real fast. I'm just stealing that.
Yeah, but it was bugged. You found some bug in it.
Yes, there was something weird where it was like starting at like a weird high, but it's whatever. But the idea is that what I love about Swadge development is that you have such a limited amount to work with, and so you have to work within these constraints, and you have to find creative solutions to problems, and I really love that about it. My favorite story for this Swadge is actually for one of Adam's modes, so I'll let him speak to that first. If you want to talk about Shredder.
Is Shredder next on the list?
I don't know. Yes, it is.
Oh, all right. Then sure. I'll talk briefly about Shredder and play it at the same time. I don't know what your favorite part about it is, though, but...
I can circle back around to it if you don't hit on it.
Awesome. Great. Well, this is going to be super awkward. So Shredder is a first-person shooter, which was... I can't shoot things. I'll just walk around here. Oh, I have a theory. There we go. Friendship is magic. Yeah, so it's a first-person shooter, which is super exciting. And it looks like a 3D game, but it's not. Don't let your eyes deceive you. It's actually more similar to Wolfenstein than Doom, as much as, this year is Doom-themed. So the whole game takes place on a 2D plane. There's no up-down. It's kind of like Asteroids, but, the perspective is different, so it looks exciting. And... I learned how to do all this after reading a great tutorial on raycasting at lowdev.org. Lowdev.org. Yep. But if you search like raycasting tutorial, it's the first thing that pops up, and it's wonderfully written. And there's a lot of math if you love math, and if you hate math, I wouldn't recommend it. But it's really nifty, and there's a lot of insight into how old shooters worked and other first-person adventure kind of dungeony games. Yeah. And I already mentioned that it worked great in the simulator, but it was terrible on the Swadge until it was optimized. And what was your favorite story?
Okay, so what I love about this is you have to find creative solutions for problems. And I remember when I was first playtesting this mode, I remember thinking that it was annoying that because the levels are sort of maze-like, it can be hard to find like the last enemy, which is actually what I'm doing now. But what I noticed is that you had tricked the LEDs into working as a kind of radar. So when they're of nearby, you can actually see the upper ring will kind of indicate in a directional way. And I remember typing up that feedback that it was hard to find the enemies, and then seeing that and being like, oh, you've already solved my problem. Oh, beautiful genius.
Even if we can't find the last one now.
Oh, here it is.
Oh, there you go. So you can...
Somewhere, it's like... Yep, got it.
There you go. Radar in action. Oh, thank you. All right. The next mode is called Stomp. And if you've played certain dance games, it'll be pretty familiar. Uh-oh, camera needs adjusting. Thank you, whoever said that. It's also impossible to play this game with any sort of delay. But this was written by Richard Van Tassel, who I don't know if he actually made it to MAGFest.
He unfortunately did not this year.
He unfortunately did not this year. Pour one out for our homies. But he dropped into our Slack. He wrote it real quick, like in 2 weeks or so, and then kind of disappeared again. So, like, I'm super grateful for him. I just don't know where he went. But I hope he comes back next year, because it's about the best DDR clone you can get without a speaker. Next on the list is Personal Demon. This was another one of mine. If you have played anything like a Tamagotchi, it's pretty similar. You can, let's see, you can feed your pet. You can, play with your pet, all sorts of things. It gets happy, it gets sad, full, not full. It poops. Everyone loves it when the thing poops. It can get sick. You can get angry. It gets older. It gets a cake on its birthday. But I think the most exciting thing about this mode for me was the collaborative nature of it, because there's a lot of art. There are a couple of different demons that can spawn. And all I had to do was ask around other MAGFest staff members, hey, can I get some art? Here are the requirements. It's got to be, 32 by 32 pixels, and it's got to be like a sick one and a happy one and a fat one. And the community pulled through, which was great because I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. So a whole bunch of people contributed art to this one, which I'm super grateful for. And hopefully they'll stick around for whatever the next Swadge is, because we always need more art. If you're an artist, let me know. I love artists. They don't love me back. Well, about that. So sometimes you get to a point with your personal demon where they might become a little too unruly and you've just had enough of it, or you're just a straight up monster. It was one of the bits of feedback was that someone wanted a way just to restart the game rather than, play out a couple of turns. So you can commit murder. And you can get away with it too. We may have skipped around in our slides. Did we? Oh.
We have slides?
We did have slides. It doesn't matter. We're doing this live. I think someone shuffled the slides around. Charles, do you want to talk about Flight Sim?
Okay. So I did the Flight Sim this year. The Flight Sim, I guess you can get it up. So it is actually a 3D game, even though it is a very janky 3D game. The way this played out was last year, because MAGFest wasn't happening, there was going to be a virtual MAGFest in VR chat. And Greg Lord, I don't know if he's watching this, but maybe, he made the virtual harbor, which is the sort of Gaylord in reimagining. And I was like, can you make it really, really low poly? And he's like, I got you, fam. And I was like, can you also use line segments instead of triangles? And he's like, yeah, gotcha. And sure enough, that's what we get. So these lines are actually being rendered into 3D space as you fly through. The goal is you have to pick up the beans and go through the rings. So there's 69 beans, and if you get all the beans, then you get 100% score, and if you only get some of the beans, then you get much less than that, and it's like a just fastest time score, and it does keep your time. This was another example of something that had to be like super duper optimized for the device in order to run, but we were able to do it all the way down to it did make changes in the display driver to be able to just I need to go draw these pixels real fast, and I don't need to worry about if I'm writing outside of the memory bounds. There is a bug in it, which I was able to, I've never found, but after I let this run for several hours, eventually it just crashes. So I don't know why or where that is, but yeah, when you turn off all of the safety checks, every now and then things just kind of go wrong. Oh, and if you're curious, the VR chat portal that's over in the Maryland registration thing, Maryland C code check thing, that is running the world that this was based off of.
All right, cool. We're getting towards the end of our modes here, and I think we're all done with the games, so now we get to the utilities section. We have one here called Tuner Gnome, which was written by Bryce, who's in the front row. Everyone clap for Bryce. And also collaborated with Kevin, who does not appear to be here, but go Kevin, there we go. So Kevin's a musician, Bryce is a programmer, and when you put them together, you get a little tuner instrument. So we mentioned color chord before, it's on here. We have a microphone. It can hear you. and it can hear notes. So if you want to try to tune your instrument, each LED gets assigned to a guitar string that's in one mode, or you can pick to any particular note, or you have this little hum whatever you want and it'll show up for you. Violin, ukulele, other notes. I'm not really a musician, but it works in the sense that I've played pure sine waves at it and it's accurate, so that works.
Another interesting little thing to compare here is if you have the reflector Swadge, the hexagon, the tunal mode on that is conceptually similar. I'm not sure how much code they share, but
most.
This is how much better you can make the tunal when you have a screen.
Yep. Screen is cool. We're never going back.
Oh, and to preempt this question, yes, the Swadge has a microphone. It is always listening, and judging.
Note that it can't talk to anybody outside, no Wi-Fi, but it still does judge.
Yep.
Is there a reason for the instrument switching besides just like aesthetically looks like on the screen? Like, is it like totally like making something different?
Yes, I do have the mic, the big one. Right, so for the guitar mode, right, it's listening for the 6 guitar strings and it assigns an LED to each one of those. Ukulele, I believe, has 4 different strings, and a violin is also a different set of strings. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a musician. But it will listen to whatever the strings for that instrument should be. That too. Oh, that's right. Nope, this is Metronome.
Correct, yes.
There you go. So guitar's what? D, A, E, G, B, and another E, but a different E. And violin's got a D, a G, an A, and an E. Ukulele is apparently a C, a G, an E, and an A. See, I'm learning things today. This is great. And I guess those are the stringed instruments that we care about. So if you play like a viola or a bass, you're out of luck. Yeah. That's true. It's all open source if you want to write your own firmware. And the last mode is color chord, which was pretty much the same as the reflector. You can hum notes into it, and it lights the LEDs to the appropriate color. Again, if you want to come over here and sing, you're more than welcome. There you go. Nicely done. And it plots the spectrum to the screen too, because even though you don't really need the screen for it, it's real estate, so we may as well do something with it, right? And those are... No, I mentioned metronome. I can show you again. It's a metronome. You can change the time signature. You can change the speed. You can change it back to tuner. All your favorites. And I believe those are the modes. I didn't miss any, did we? We talked about all of these. Perfect. That's what it does. Now we can go back to some slides. And we can rip through these notes because we just talked about that. Oh, yeah. No multiplayer this year. So someone right before the panel asked about wireless connectivity. A Swadge this year cannot talk to other Swadges. This was a design decision we made when we thought that everything may be pure remote, and we may have been selling them online, which we didn't because you're here and you're wearing them. But we still want to encourage, as best distancing as you can. So stay 2 meters and or 6 feet apart, depending on if you believe in the superior metric system or the inferior, whatever we have. And hopefully wireless connectivity will be back in a future year. And we talked about those. These are the slides that got out of order, which is fine.
You didn't talk about the menu.
Oh, I didn't talk about the menu. I guess the menu is its own mode, isn't it? It's the unsung hero. Nope, that ain't it. Right, so you have a menu mode. So if you let your Swadge idle on the menu for long enough, you'll actually get screensavers, and this is the best that Windows 95 has to offer. So we got flying toasters. We got a classic Starfield. We have something that was not sponsored by Warner Brothers. That was just a total coincidence. And then we have a simulation of a forest fire. So I actually was looking for fun cellular automata. I think everyone, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people are familiar with Conway's Game of Life. I see some thumbs in the audience. And that's like a classic thing that computer science students will do to learn about cellular automata. And it looks pretty interesting. You can get gliders and other patterns in there. But I want something different, so I hunted around, and it turns out there's a lot of cellular automata. It's just a Google away. But the one that was most visually interesting to me is this forest fire simulation where trees will grow over time. Those are the white dots, and then eventually it'll catch fire. And when it does, it'll ignite its neighbors, and ignite its neighbors, and ignite its neighbors, kind of like that. And then eventually the trees will grow back over time. So that's your little simulation if you want to just be a pyromaniac, I suppose. And of course, there's the null screensaver, which is the easiest one to write. Also, when you're on the menu, if you use the up and down keys, you can change your LED pattern and color to be a whole bunch of different things. So feel free to express yourself. You don't all have to pick rainbow, even though rainbow is the coolest one. There are plenty of them out there to mess around with. I don't remember. The holiday ones were originally written for the Reflector Swadge, and I totally stole that code and just dropped it in there. It turns out 6 LEDs here or 6 LEDs there. But I think one of them is like maybe Christmassy colored, and the other one is Hanukkah-y colored, like give or take. Something like that. What's the what? There is an antenna in front of the IC in the back. Good eye. So the chip we use is an ESP8266, which is a Wi-Fi SoC, which is why we've done Wi-Fi connectivity in other years. Unfortunately, it does nothing this year. Well, it kind of does something this year. So since you brought it up, let's see if I can put in L's secret code. So we do have this Easter egg mode as well. And it can scan for Wi-Fi networks. Do I want an open network? Not really, because if I have an open network, that means I'm going to have to type in a password.
No, open.
No, well, don't worry about it.
Yeah, this mode does have a keyboard. It's really annoying to use.
It's a tiny keyboard. But yeah, here's some Wi-Fi things in the area. Wi-Fi, why not?
How did they change the font? That shouldn't be possible. I wrote this. That shouldn't be possible.
Yep. I think that's there's a network that's got a bunch of emojis in the title.
I never tried connecting to a SID with emojis.
But also buried in there is like a little credits menu. So you can see everyone who worked on there.
And do a couple more things too.
Wi-Fi scanner.
Yeah.
What's up with the networks that are gibberish? Are those like fake networks?
No, those are people who put emojis in their network names. And we only have a font that does ASCII. So those people are just mean.
But that does actually like turn into a power scanner and other stuff. So you can like actually see, like play with it and see like what the Wi-Fi signal is at different places.
And there's also pixel flute and the.
So we also have a slide that says Swadges and VR chat to do. Charles?
I never actually got to getting the video together. But so I guess I'll talk about it. There is a map which is about to go live, which is in VR chat, which is the museum of all of the previous Swadges, where we have 3D models of all of the Swadges, but we didn't get that published quite in time.
All right. Now we get to the really boring part of this. I learned a couple of things about development as I was developing, and I figured I'd share that with the other nerds here. Anyone who's not a developer, you can tune out for hopefully no more than 5 minutes, and then we'll get to the Q&A portion, which is way more exciting. So, optimizing for size. As I mentioned before, we're using an ESP8266, which has a whopping 2 megabytes of memory on it, and that's for everything. Which means that if you're trying to do big things, like things with graphics or maps or what have you, you can run out of space pretty quickly. Especially if you're accidentally putting things in RAM instead of ROM. Much like a regular computer, we have a very small amount of fast RAM and a much larger amount of slow ROM. And if you're just writing code, you're not really thinking about where your variables are ending up, but you can make a wonderful thing called a map file, which tells you the memory address of every variable and every function, and you can tell where things are going. Which is great because then you can sort it by size and figure out what's big, and you can move that where you need to move it. Or you can delete big functions that aren't used. The first version actually had a bunch of draw calls for like exotic shapes and curves and bends, and we weren't using them, but they were getting compiled in there. So those got deleted, which was great. That saved us a couple of kilobytes. Another great way to optimize for space is to use the OS flag on your compiler, which makes your code smaller but slower. And we don't do that because we want things to run fast. So we use O3, which is great. It makes your things faster but bigger. But sometimes that's too big, unfortunately. So one of the things that O3 does is inlining. So every function usually is its own compiled thing, and then you call the function and it does the thing and it returns. But one way to optimize code is to inline, which is you take that whole function body and you copy it every place you would call it elsewhere. And this is faster because it removes the overhead of calling the function and returning the function, but it makes code huge because you end up copying the same thing over and over and over and over, which is bad. Especially for our display driver code. It was inlining some functions from our display driver, and it very quickly ran out of space. And that's when I learned about the no inline attribute, when you can tell your compiler, hey, even if you're optimizing, don't inline this one. Just don't touch it. Leave it alone. And it works. It's great. You don't inline anymore, but you still get all the O3 optimizations for the rest of your code. But optimizing, you can also fail pretty hard at. And there's a compiler flag called fshort enums. So if you're familiar with C code and you're familiar with enums, for those who aren't, it's kind of like a more human-friendly variable typing. So usually you have integer and everything's a number, which is great. But maybe you want to have a more descriptive number. Like we have map tiles for the first-person shooter, and each tile is either a wall or it's empty or it's an enemy spawn point. And if you're just trying to track those with numbers, all the numbers kind of get gobbledy up in your head. So you make an enum instead, and you say each number is actually something else. It's much easier to work with. By default, an enum will use the native bit width of an integer on your system. So in this case, it would take up 32 bits per number, which is a lot. You can count up to 2 million some odd. But we don't actually need that. We only needed to count up to 5. So you can tell it to have short enums, which says only use as much space as you need, no more. There's the quote from the documentation. No one ever reads documentation. And this is usually great unless you're using a library and one half of the library has short enums and the other half that you're calling with does not have short enums, and then all of your addresses get offset and it crashes real fast and real hard and you don't know why, and it's very confusing, and you spend a week just slamming your head against the keyboard. So my advice to you is do not use short enums. It is a trap. But you can use another attribute called the packed attribute, which says make this specific enum smaller. And you can be very careful about doing that it's not anything shared between libraries, and it's much nicer. It saved us a lot of space in the long run. And that is the run through of the modes. Those are some software tips. That is our development. Please help us. We are not a huge team. You can see everyone who's in the credits. If you can write some code, we would love for you to help us. If you can design some hardware or 3D print or just do general 3D CAD, love to have your help. If you design games, even if you don't want to write embedded code, come on down. You can do some game design and someone else can do some implementation for you. If you're an artist, I said before, we always need more artists because art makes things look cool, even if the code underneath sucks. So if you're an artist or if you have a friend that's an artist, send them our way. And random people. Really, if you're none of those above, we still like you because we could always use a tester or we could use ideas. You are the end consumers of these products, so the more input you have earlier on, the better it is. As I said, technical skills not required. So if you're interested, you can email us at circuitboards@magfest.org. I will try to check that during MAGFest. I will definitely check it afterwards. And maybe we can be friends. Oh, yeah, and I guess the future, you stayed this long. We're probably... Oh, there's a hand in the back? Oh, yes. The final slide has it too, so we'll be good. It's also on the back of the Swadge. We try to make it easy for people to contact us. Please be my friend. The future. So we're probably going to abandon this chip next time around. We're going to get a more powerful one with more IOs, better peripherals. Who knows what the cost will be? Hand in the back. The blue thing underneath is a programmer. And that breaks out all of the old things. So in this particular one, I took the barrel Swadge from last year. I ripped off the processor, and I jumped it to a new processor on that breadboard for some testing. And if the name ESP32 excites you, you're going to be excited. And we can do cool things like this. So we'll see... That is not a teaser for next year's theme.
If the Swadges had any bearing on next year's theme,
that is not confirmed.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
I'll say if these had any bearing on it, then this would be the NHL 94 theme.
Yeah, we find out about the theme after the fact sometimes. We kind of have to roll with the punches. We could.
Yeah. Although I do like Mega Man. I'll put it forth. I'll see if they take it or not. We also, actually, Charles, you can just talk about this.
Yes. So one of the things was the museum-ish thing, the gallery in VR Chat has all of the previous year's Swadges in glorifying 3D, where all of the parts have been modeled. Mind you, this is better CAD than we had when we made it to begin with. So there's this. This was the Castlevania Swadge, the first one. There's videos that talk about some of the pieces of these, just different years of Swadge and some of the history behind it. Also, just shameless plug for the VR Chat stuff. It also has just history of MAGFest stuff in here. So, yeah. This is, if you get VR Chat, you can just look up MAGFest in VR Chat, and it will, I don't know, it's the atrium, and yeah, you kind of have to noodle around to get here. That was it.
All right. So now we are at the... Jesus, that's loud. Now we are at the Q&A portion. I think I've said everything that I wanted to say, so now I'll take your questions and I'll say things that I may not need to say. Yes. The badge is covered in 2021. Was that a question or a comment? So the elaboration is that this was originally designed for MAGFest 2021, which didn't happen in person. We had a telethon. Some of you may remember that. There were some beans. It was a good time. And I was preoccupied with a great many other things and never got back around to changing the 2021s to 2022s on our silk screen. And no one bothered me about this. And by the time I hit the very expensive order button, it was what it was. So it's a little memorial to the year that could have been.
Also, fun on that, this was a factor. Certainly not the deciding factor, but it was a factor in keeping the Doom theme, doing the Doom theme this year. We definitely were arguing that And Dak was definitely arguing that, hey, we have this awesome chainsaw. We have to, we have to do a theme that embraces the chainsaw. There was some consideration of doing like Resident Evil or something, so there could be an undead theme. But we were like, yeah, chainsaw still fits with that. But hey, we did Doom. Super happy about that. The Swadge, there was no way we were not doing this once we had it.
All right. We'll come back to you. I see a question in the back. How long should we expect the battery to last? If you turn it off at night, it should last through MAGFest. I say should. It might get close. Other question in the far back. See me after the panel if you have any technical problems. Or the email. Yes. The development environment is Linux. So the way I did my development was using WSL, or Windows Subsystem for Linux, and I know it runs great under that. Native Linux is also fine. For Macintosh, I don't know. I know the Flasher works under Macintosh because we had some people do that, but the actual development environment, you may need to install some sort of Linuxy thing to get that to work.
I think it would work okay in just OS X command line, but I'm not 100% sure on that. You might need some stuff from Homebrew.
Yep. All right, we're going to go you, then you. Yep, you can certainly virtualize Linux. Yep. Where can you get a Chainsaw Swadge? You can get them at the MAGFest merch booth, which is in the expo hall behind the
Indie arcade area.
The arcade area.
Very, very back,
the back of Expo B. Then there was someone next to you. Can it run Crisis? In a word, no. Bethesda is porting it to Skyrim. Look for a firmware update.
You can look for that in next year's Swadge.
All right. What other questions are out there? I saw your hand first.
Last year said everyone had secrets. Are there any secrets in this guy?
Yes, so the one secret is that Wi-Fi scanner mode. If you connect to an SSID, you can also get a clock. You can pull it down some network time and make a nice little desk toy. And since everyone stayed this long, to get it, if you're on the menu and you input the Konami code on the D-pad, which you probably figured out pretty quickly because you were asking questions about it before, that is how you get to it. You scan for Wi-Fi, it'll show you all the SSIDs in the area, and then it pulls up a very small keyboard, but a very functional keyboard with uppercase and lowercase and all that stuff, and you can connect and go for it. That is the secret. Yes. You can make a makeshift one if you can solder and have an FTDI cable. The programmers are not for sale. They were only part of that kick-in tier. But if you email circuitboards@magfest.org and you're excited to program something, we'll see what we can do.
We do have some programmers for people who are going to be actively working on it. We can work with you on those.
Yeah.
And also they're the files. So,
Right. All the files are open source. If you want to fabricate and manufacture it yourself, you're more than welcome to.
But yeah, for anybody who wants to hack on the Swadge or do development, please email us. We will make it happen, even if I have to go order another 10.
Yeah, Jillian will make it happen. Yeah. That's not on me. That's on her.
I'll make it happen by going, hey, Adam.
Killing me. Yes. Yep. That's a good question. There are 2 megabytes. How many of them are we actively using? Less than 2.
Is that a wrong? The 2 megs of flash? I thought there was more flash.
No, there's only 2 megs of flash. 2 megs of holy moly! If they gave me 2 megs of RAM, I'd be over the moon. Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. I can pull that information up if you're curious. Just email circuitboards@magfest.org and I'll get an answer to you. I think there's a hand over there. No, the USB port is for power only. The data lines are not connected. The ESP8266 does not have native USB support, and there's no USB UART chip, and there is a pretty janky way that Charles figured out to get USB support on an ESP, but it requires GPIOs and stuff that we didn't have. So that USB port is for power only. Yeah, see a hand in the front row.
So I noticed in the 3D printing you're getting, most of the prints that you did have the pins on the bottom, or on the back. But that first one had one on the side. Was that change aesthetic, utility?
That was more utility than aesthetic. So those pins are used for programming, which is great. We also break all the signals out into those pins for debugging, which is great. But that means that if you take your fingers and you rub on those pins as it's running, you can mess up the display bus more than anything
If you
else.
touch it, it will assume that you're an I2C screen peripheral and attempt to display directly for you. And because you are not able to speak that protocol, it's not going to work. But it's not the Swadge's fault. It's you.
Right. So you can make your screen real glitchy, which meant that we wanted to try to place that connector where hands wouldn't be when someone was holding it naturally. And that was the best spot that we could find. The one on the bottom. Oh, permanently damage it? No, it's fine. Just don't hit it with a hammer. Yeah.
The ESP is ridiculously durable to things like ESD. I've been very surprised what these can survive. No guarantees, of course, but as we said in the manual, you cannot void the warranty because it doesn't have one. But yes, the ESP is just a tank.
Yeah. Charles, what am I looking at?
Give me a second.
Okay, we're giving him a second. I don't know, he passed me a Swadge. It's doing something I've never seen it before. Oh. Not globally, no.
Some of the modes do have that.
The writing on the runes doesn't mean anything. Well, the one to the immediate left of the screen means something. Those are Roman numerals for a year. That is incorrect. But all the others, I asked an artist for some runes, and it gave me some runes. So as far as I know, they are art, but for all I know, they are some sort of ancient script that can summon a demon. Oof. Back next to the light. Do I have a picture? Do you have a picture of the dog?
Let me see if I do on this phone.
We're looking up a picture of the dog. If I can explain it to you like a 5-year-old, how does the programmer work? Right. Well, let's say you're 10, not 5. How about that? Is that a good compromise? So what you would do is plug the programmer into your computer and plug the Swadge into the programmer. And then you would have to get our source code and an environment. So if you go to, I forget the exact GitHub URL, but if you go to whatever the Swadge website is on the back, there's a link to a GitHub page. And if you go to that GitHub page, there's a getting started guide. What is happening?
Charles, you are a mad genius.
I take back what I said about Crisis. And this is running in real time, everybody. That is, it does look better in person. The camera is not doing it the full justice, but
Is that ray trace?
I think it may have been ray traced at one point.
I think that technically this is ray traced right now, but only through a hilarity of like gluing things together.
Yeah, can you explain what's happening? Because I don't even know what's going on right now.
So is part of one of the Easter egg things. Aww. This is the first I'm seeing your dog.
A good dog and a great playtester.
Yeah. I could have sworn I posted photos on the Slack.
I don't remember.
Oh.
Give me a second here. It's part of the... Oh, it's really dark. I gotta find a brighter scene here. There we go. As part of the Easter egg, if you connect to a Wi-Fi network, there is a tool in the firmware folder called TestPF. TestPF will capture a part of your screen and give it an IP address for a Swadge, which the Swadge prints on itself, which you can press left and right. Press left and right. Adam?
Oh, sorry.
Or I guess not. I guess that doesn't work now. Anyway, the point is you get an IP address and you can cast part of your screen to your Swadge through your cell phone. So I pulled up a video of somebody playing Crysis, so.
Got an even better picture?
And because we just keep on ping-ponging back and forth, here's a better picture of dog.
This is with the Swadge test article attached.
Yep, right on the collar. Okay, and let's see, hold on. I was not done with that other question. We got Crisis interrupted. So, right, first you connect the programmer to your computer, you put your Swadge in the programmer, you find our page on GitHub. There's a getting started guide, which will walk you through setting up an environment so you can download and compile the code. You download and compile the code, and you press a button, and it shoots it on over to the Swadge. You're free to modify the code before compilation and make it do whatever you want. Welcome. How are we on time? 9:30. Let's take 2 more questions, and then anyone else can just hunt me down personally, and it'll be you two. So I saw your hand first. Is there a way to emulate the Swadge? Well, simulate, not emulate, but yes. So it's also, if you go to that GitHub page and you run through that whole getting started environment thing, one of the things that it generates is an exe just to run on your computer. That's in our Slack. Oh no, that's right. There's also a release on the GitHub page where you can download an exe for Windows, but I think it's just Windows. And last question. The year is correct. It is 0 indexed.
All right.
Well, it's been my pleasure to give this talk. If you have any other questions, again, circuitboards@magfest.org. I'll be hanging out around there if you just want to talk to me personally. And enjoy the rest of MAGFest.